There is a statue standing in the woods outside Gravity Falls, a triangle carved out of gray stone, one thin arm reaching forward with its hand held open, waiting for somebody to walk up and shake it. Nobody in the show ever does. It just sits there in the leaves, patient, and the last shot the series gives us is a little glimmer of light catching in its eye. That is the note the whole thing ends on. Not a body in a grave, not a monster defeated for good, but a handshake left hanging in the air. Tonight we are going through the dark theory behind every character in this show, one at a time, the villain and the con man and the twins and the small strange people at the edges of town, and the reading each of them hides underneath the bright summer surface. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, let the pillow take the weight of your head, and if you have not subscribed yet, it genuinely does help us keep making these long ones for you. We start with the triangle, because everything in Gravity Falls bends back toward him eventually. For most of the show, Bill Cipher is a joke that turns out to be a knife. He shows up first in an episode called Dreamscaperers, a floating yellow triangle with a top hat and a bow tie and a voice that sounds like a game show host who has seen the end of the universe and found it funny. He talks fast, he cracks wise, he offers deals. And for a long time, that is all he seems to be, a chaos gremlin who lives in the space behind your eyelids and wants, vaguely, to cause trouble. The show lets you underrate him on purpose. Then the finale arrives and the sky turns to fire and you realize the joke was standing on top of a genocide the whole time. Here is what the show itself gives you, plainly, and then here is what the later material fills in. And I want to keep those two things separate because the gap between them is the entire dark theory of Bill Cipher. On screen, Bill is a dream demon, an entity from the place the characters call the Nightmare Realm. And his plan is to tear a hole between his dying world and ours and let the two collapse together into one long party of madness. That event is Weirdmageddon, and by most fans' reckoning, it stands as one of the closest things a Disney cartoon has ever done to just showing you the apocalypse and holding the shot. Ford is the one who names Bill's true goal in the show, which was never simply to explore other worlds or to gather knowledge. It was to merge his dying dimension with our living one and rule the wreckage. That is canon. You can watch it happen. What the show does not tell you, and what the book called The Book of Bill filled in when it came out in the summer of 2024, is where the triangle actually came from, and it is one of the bleakest backstories ever quietly attached to a children's character. Bill was born in a two-dimensional world called Euclydia, a flatland of sentient shapes, which is the real reason he is a triangle and not just a spooky floating eye. And he was born wrong by the standards of that world, with a kind of mutation, an extra eye, a defect that let him perceive a third dimension the others could not even imagine. His parents, named Euclid and Scalene, treated it as a sickness. They medicated him to make the visions stop. Picture that for a second, a child who can see a bigger reality than anyone around him, being drugged quiet by the people who are supposed to love him in a world with no depth at all. And then he burned it down, all of it. The book calls it the Euclidean Massacre, and it does not soften what it is. Bill destroyed his entire home dimension, every shape in it, including his own parents, and the story he tells himself about it is that he was setting them free, letting them finally see the third dimension the way he could. That is the part that gets me, honestly, because the book stages it so carefully. When Bill tries to recount the actual moment, he blacks out. The retelling itself seems to flinch, skipping past the worst of it, as if even the page cannot quite look straight at it. And for one flicker, you see something that looks a lot like remorse before he papers over it and calls the whole thing a liberation. The most confident entity in the multiverse cannot look directly at the worst thing he ever did. His swagger is a wall built in front of a memory. That is not fan theory. That is how the official book frames him. And it reframes every wisecrack he makes in the series as the patter of somebody running from himself at the speed of light. I should be careful here because this is book canon, not show canon. Alex Hirsch wrote The Book of Bill years after the series ended, and while it is treated as official, none of the Euclydia material appears in the 40 episodes. So if you only ever watch the show, Bill's origin is a blank, and the blank was on purpose. In fact, the wiki and the design history make clear that Bill was originally meant to be a one-shot character, a single spooky guest in a single episode, before Hirsch and the writers realized what they had and built him into the spine of the entire second season. The central villain of the show almost did not stick around past one appearance. The design tells a similar story of a thing that changed as it grew. Bill was not always yellow. In the earliest concept work, he was green, with thinner limbs and little white gloves. And as far as fans have pieced together, that abandoned green version may have slipped through into an early broadcast, though nobody has ever pinned down the exact moment for certain. Some fans believe a blink, and you miss it moment in the episode Fight Fighters might be a glimpse of that old green design, though it is more of a fan claim than a confirmed cameo. The color we all associate with him now, that hazard sign yellow, was a later decision. The triangle you have a whole emotional relationship with started life a different color and got caught on camera before anyone fixed it. Then there is the voice, which is one of my favorite pieces of trivia about the entire production. Bill's voice is Alex Hirsch doing a deliberately bad impression of the filmmaker David Lynch, specifically Lynch's own character from Twin Peaks, the hard-of-hearing FBI man Gordon Cole, who shouts every line at full volume. That flat, loud, slightly wrong cadence Bill has, that is Lynch filtered through a comedian doing him badly on purpose. And the detail that makes it perfect is that Lynch himself was actually approached to voice Bill and turned it down. So the role went to the guy who could do the impression, and the show ended up with a cosmic horror who talks like an in-joke about one of the strangest directors alive. The show also plants him long before he ever speaks. Once you know what to look for, Bill is seated all through the backgrounds of the first season, drawn on walls, hidden in the pattern of the rug in the Mystery Shack, printed on the backs of cards, tucked into the shape of a window in the attic. He is watching the twins for a whole season before he introduces himself, which is a nice bit of craft, but it is also a properly creepy idea when you sit with it. The threat was always in the room, and the set design leans into it in code, too. There is graffiti painted on a pipe inside the shack that reads, in a simple letter shifted cipher, "Bill is watching." The house the twins are sleeping in is announcing the danger in a language nobody in the story can read. When Bill finally gets his hands on a human body, the show does not treat it as a fun power-up. In the episode Sock Opera, Dipper, exhausted and desperate to get into a locked laptop, makes the mistake of shaking Bill's hand for help. And Bill immediately takes his body, shoving Dipper's consciousness out into a sock puppet while the demon wears the 12-year-old like a coat. And what does he do with a child's body once he has it? He starts trying to destroy it, staying awake for days on end, slamming it into things, treating the whole thing as a disposable toy because it is not his. That is the first time you really understand what he is, not a trickster, a thing that sees other beings as material. The scale he operates on is deliberately absurd, and the show even lets the numbers get away from it in a way that has become its own little mystery. In the finale, Bill announces that he is 1,012 years old. Fans have pointed out for years that this number does not actually fit anything. Not the cosmology the show sketches, and not its own framing of Bill as young by the standards of his home dimension, and the series simply never addresses it. It is one of those figures that sounds enormous and precise and falls apart the second you poke it, which, weirdly, suits him. Bill is a being whose entire self-image does not survive close inspection, right down to how old he claims to be. And above him, the show hangs one more figure, mostly in whispers, the axolotl, a vast, pink, amphibian god referred to in a poem that fans decoded, an entity ranked somewhere above Bill in the order of things, whose verse says that Bill burned his own dimension and that to absolve that crime he would need, in the poem's phrasing, a different form and a different time. That line is the show's own hook for a possible return, left deliberately open. The name itself is a small dark joke if you follow it back. The real-world axolotl, the little Mexican salamander, takes its name from Xolotl, an Aztec god associated with fire, with deformity, with the journey of the dead through the underworld. Gravity Falls flips that. Its axolotl is a benevolent creator figure, while the traits of the actual mythological Xolotl, the misfortune and the monstrosity, sit far closer to Bill than to the god watching over him. The naming quietly points at the villain. So how does something like this die? This is the second of the load-bearing facts about the show, and it is worth getting exactly right because it is the opposite of what most cartoons do. Bill is not defeated by a prophecy. The series spends a lot of energy setting up a zodiac wheel, a circle of 10 symbols matched to 10 characters who, joined together at the right moment, are supposed to be able to destroy him. It is the classic chosen destiny machine, the thing that always saves the day in stories like this, and it fails. It fails completely, because at the crucial moment Stan and Ford, the two old men at the center of the show, are too bitter with each other to hold hands and close the circle. The prophecy just collapses. What actually kills Bill is a con man's trick, which we will come back to when we get to Stan and Ford because it belongs to them more than it belongs to the triangle. What matters for Bill himself is that he does not get a clean death either. In the show, his body petrifies into that stone statue in the woods, the one we opened on, hand out, eye catching the light. And the Book of Bill went further and told us his consciousness survived the erasure of his body and was carried off to a place called the Theraprism, a kind of cosmic rehabilitation facility in a neutral zone between dimensions, where he is meant to be reformed. He wrote the entire Book of Bill from inside it during what the book jokingly calls arts and crafts therapy, and the whole thing is a message in a bottle, a lure, an attempt to get a reader on the outside to make a deal and break him loose. He shows no interest whatsoever in actually changing. The facility eventually confiscates the book, so the honest answer to whether Bill is gone is that nobody in charge of the story will say. He is not confirmed dead, and he is not confirmed coming back. And the glow in the statue's eye is there precisely so you cannot close the door. There is one last piece I love because it is so small and so grim. Fans have circulated a story about a deleted scene from the box set where Ford spits in Bill's eye, and Bill licks it off, though it is the kind of detail that is hard to confirm as more than fan lore. If the moment really happened, it would mean that Bill, a floating geometric symbol, has a tongue, which is a strange thing to picture underneath all that swagger. It is the kind of throwaway body horror the show could only get away with in a deleted scene, and it tells you something about how deep the writers were willing to go with him. Underneath the jokes and the deals and the top hat, they always understood he was a thing with an appetite. The triangle is the mouth of the whole show, and he spends the entire series smiling with it. If Bill is the mouth of the show, Ford is its wound. Stanford Pines, the author of the journals, the man whose handwriting the twins spend a whole season chasing, is in a lot of ways the saddest figure in Gravity Falls, and the show hides that under a coat of pulpy adventure until almost the very end. Start with the body, because the show did. Ford has 6 fingers on each hand. It is the first thing you learn about the author before you ever meet him, because the symbol on the cover of each journal is a 6-fingered hand with a number printed on the palm. In the story, it is just a birth trait. Polydactyly, the reason the young Ford got teased, and the reason he grew up feeling like a freak who did not fit anywhere. But the choice of that specific difference reaches back into real folklore in a way that is a little too neat to be an accident. In old European superstition, extra fingers were sometimes read as a mark of witchcraft or a sign of a changeling, which is where the stubborn myth that Anne Boleyn had a 6th finger comes from. In Hungarian folk belief, the shamanic figures called the taltos were said to be born with extra fingers or extra teeth, marked from birth as people who could see into another world. That is Ford exactly, a man born with a physical sign that he was meant to perceive things other people cannot, who spends his life proving the superstition right and paying for it. Here's the canon spine, kept careful. Ford and his twin brother Stanley grew up in a town called Glass Shard Beach in New Jersey, and Ford was the gifted one, the brilliant one, the boy with a future. As a teenager, he built a perpetual motion machine for a science fair that was going to win him a place at his dream school, a prestigious place the show calls West Coast Tech, the kind of school that changes a life. And his brother Stan, messing around, accidentally broke the machine the night before the judging. The project failed, the dream school passed, and their father, furious that the family ticket to money had been ruined, threw Stan out of the house. Ford went off to a much lesser university, a place literally named Backupsmore, and the 2 brothers did not speak again for about 10 years. Everything dark in this show grows out of that one broken machine on that one night. 2 boys who were supposed to sail the world together on a boat they fixed up as kids split in half over an accident. Ford arrived in Gravity Falls in the mid-1970s to study the town's strange concentration of the supernatural, and this is where I want to be precise, because it is one of the details fans have corrected before. Ford did not spend a decade calmly researching before things went wrong. He arrived around 1975, and the accident that eventually swallowed him happened around 1982. So roughly 7 years passed, not 10. In those 6 years, he wrote the journals, he cataloged the impossible things in the woods, and he formulated a clever idea the show treats as hard canon, not theory. He called it the natural law of weirdness magnetism. The premise is that there is an invisible barrier around Gravity Falls that traps supernatural weirdness inside it. So the strangeness accumulates in that one valley instead of leaking out into the ordinary world. That is why the town is the way it is. And I want to flag one thing here because it is a trap a lot of retellings fall into. The town being a nexus of weirdness is canon. The popular idea that Bill created the town's weirdness is a fan theory, not something the show confirms. The weirdness was already there. What Bill did was find the one man obsessed enough to build a door, because that is the real tragedy of Ford. He was lonely, brilliant, desperate to be recognized after a lifetime of being the freak, and something came along that told him he was special. In his research, Ford made contact with a being he believed to be a benevolent muse, a friendly spirit of inspiration who appeared to him in dreams and helped him design his great work, a machine to punch a hole between dimensions. That muse was Bill. Ford built the interdimensional portal not knowing he was building the front door for an apocalypse, and he built it with a partner, an old college friend and gifted engineer named Fiddleford McGucket, who we will get to next because his story is even worse. The portal did what portals in these stories do. There was an accident. McGucket was nearly pulled into it and came out shattered. And when Ford finally saw what Bill actually was and what the machine was actually for, it was too late. And the fight that followed ended with Ford himself falling through the portal into the multiverse, gone for 30 years. When he comes back in the second season, the show cast J.K. Simmons to voice him, and it is a great piece of casting, because Simmons gives Ford this brittle, over-precise, slightly cold quality that tells you everything about a man who has spent 3 decades alone in hostile dimensions with nobody to talk to. Ford comes home a hero in the twins' eyes and reveals himself, over time, to be difficult, guarded, a little arrogant, and privately wrecked. He is not the wise mentor the adventure story seemed to promise. He is a man who cannot quite forgive, cannot quite connect, and who nearly repeats his own worst mistake by offering to keep Dipper in Gravity Falls as his apprentice, which would mean splitting the twins apart the same way he and Stan were split. Dipper, to his enormous credit, says no. The journals themselves hide a lovely contradiction that fans have chewed on for years, and it is the kind of thing this channel exists for. The numbering does not work. Ford, writing at the start of the third journal, says it has been 6 years, dating that entry to around 1981. Yet this is the third book in the series, which would require him to have filled 2 entire journals in a very short window while also doing all his other research. The creature catalog numbers do not line up between the books either. The only way to reconcile it is to accept that Ford wrote the journals non-sequentially, jumping between them, which is plausible for a scattered obsessive genius but is never stated on screen. It is one of those seams in the world building that the show just lives with. And then there is the material you can only get with a black light. When the third journal was published as a real book in 2016, there was a standard edition and then a limited run called the Special Edition, printed the following summer in something like 10,000 copies, that contained real ultraviolet invisible ink passages you could only read by shining a black light on the page. Some of those hidden passages are devastating. One of them establishes that Fiddleford McGucket, the memory gun's inventor, used the device to wipe the minds of the construction workers who built the portal, so they would not remember what they had helped make, though when he later aimed it at Ford, it bounced right off the metal plate in his skull and did nothing at all. Think about what that means for the man. Ford has holes in his own past he does not know are there, edited out by his own broken best friend, hidden in ink you can only see in the dark. The show buried its darkest footnote about the author in a format most people who watched it will never hold in their hands. The last thing the design history gives us is smaller and sadder in a domestic way. In the early art, Ford was drawn with a beard, and there was a cut gag in the flashback episode where Stan and Ford, reunited and bickering, adjust their glasses in perfect unison, 2 old men who cannot stand each other still moving like the same person. By some fan accounts, a gag like that surfaced in early promotional material and never made it into the show. But it tells you what the writers understood about Ford underneath all the 6-fingered mad science. He is one half of a broken thing. He spent 30 years across the multiverse and came home to the exact fight he left. The dark theory of Ford is not that he was evil. It is that being the smart one, the special one, the chosen one was the trap. And it very nearly cost him the only person who ever came looking. Which brings us to the other twin, the one wearing the fez, Grunkle Stan. I am not going to walk you through Stan's whole life tonight because we have done that in other videos and you have probably heard it. The New Jersey childhood, the boxing, the years on the road as a small-time crook. the 30 years he spent pretending to be his own brother. What I want to do instead is look at Stan through the specific lens this video is about, which is the darkness the show tucks under the loud, cheap, huckster surface. Because Stan is the character the whole series is built to make you misread. The show tells you in code from the very first episodes that this man is not what he seems, and it does it with actual hidden text. One of the recurring end credit cryptograms decodes to the phrase, "Stan is not what he seems," planted long before the episode of that name ever aired. And the visual clues are even better once you know to look. Stan is right-handed. By most fan accounts, Ford and the person writing in the journals lean left-handed, though the animation itself is not always consistent about it, and Dipper's own hand preference is harder to pin down. The journals are full of mirror writing. The intro sequence has a shot of the attic where the gravity looks wrong, which gets explained much later as a side effect of the portal running in the basement underneath the whole house. The show hid a second man and a second machine inside its own opening titles and dared you to notice. The dark theory of Stan is not really a theory at all. It is a magic trick. And the trick is that you spent a season and a half rooting for a lovable con man without realizing he had faked his own brother's death and was running a doomsday device under the gift shop. That machine is where I want to fix one detail because it has been gotten wrong before, including in retellings of this exact show. The reveal that there is a portal in the basement comes in the episode Not What He Seems, which ends with a six-fingered stranger stepping out of it for the very first time. But the full truth that Stan secretly spent 30 years trying to reactivate that portal to get his brother back is not laid out until the very next episode, the flashback called A Tale of Two Stans. Those are two separate reveals in two separate episodes, and it matters, because the emotional gut punch is not the machine, it is the 30 years. 3 decades of a con man running a tourist trap by day and in secret teaching himself enough physics to rebuild an interdimensional portal by night. All to undo the worst thing he ever did to the only person he ever loved. He let the world think he was Stanford. He wore his dead brother's name like the fez. And that flashback hides one of my favorite planted objects in the whole show. When Stan smashes through a wall to reveal the original boat he and Ford built as boys, there is graffiti on that wall inside a flashback set decades in the past that reads, "Blendin was here." That is a time traveler's tag, hidden in a memory. The show is telling you, in a throwaway background gag, that somebody has been walking through the past of these characters the entire time. And the boat itself, the Stan of War, is a Chekhov's gun planted almost 2 full seasons early. In the second episode of the whole series, Gobblewonker, Stan's wrecked little fishing boat is already named the Stan of War, long before you have any idea that is the childhood boat the brothers swore to sail the world in together. The payoff to that name is the final shot of the entire series. The con man finally pays for everything in the finale, and this is the second of the show's load-bearing facts, the one I promised we would come back to. Bill Cipher is not beaten by the prophecy. He is beaten by a Stan Pines con. With the Zodiac wheel broken and the heroes out of options, Stan disguises himself as Ford and lets Bill, who wants inside the author's mind, walk straight into his head instead. Bill takes the bait because Stan's mind is the last place a genius villain would look, precisely because everyone underestimates Stan the same way you did. And then Ford, the brother, fires the memory gun into Stan's mind with Bill trapped inside it, erasing the demon along with every memory Stan has ever had. I want to be exact about this because viewers have caught this being told wrong before. It was Ford who pulled the trigger, and it was Stan who volunteered to be the one erased, and Stan knew going in that he might lose himself completely. He wiped his own identity to kill a god. The lovable fraud who faked one death ends the show by faking one more, his own, and this time meaning it. He comes back slowly because Mabel's scrapbook and a pig named Waddles pull the pieces of him home, and I will not spoil the exact texture of that scene for you because it deserves to be watched and not summarized. But the show could not resist one final joke about how far Disney would let Stan go, and it lives in the design of his hat. In the show's earliest episodes, Stan's fez had an emblem on it, a yellow crescent and scimitar shape that looked a great deal like the symbol of the real-world Shriners Fraternal Order. Then it simply vanished, changed to a plain shape with no in-story explanation whatsoever. Hirsch later said the reason was exactly as silly as you would hope. The crew got nervous. What if the Shriners sued them? So the symbol on the hat of the show's biggest con man was itself censored out of the show. And years later, when Gravity Falls landed on Disney's streaming service, the old versions were scrubbed too, the emblem digitally erased over lingering worries about Masonic imagery. The one honest thing on Stan's costume was the one thing the network would not let him keep. Even the name we call him is a family artifact. The word Grunkle, great uncle, comes out of Hirsch's own life. Stan is loosely based on Hirsch's real grandfather, also named Stan, and the word Grunkle itself derives from a great aunt of Hirsch's named Lois, who insisted on being called Grunty Lois. The gruffest, most invented-sounding word in the show is a real thing a real old woman actually said, and there is a continuity error tangled up in this family history that Hirsch himself has admitted to, unlike a lot of the Seams fans argue about. The baby held up at the very end of A Tale of Two Stans was meant to be Shermie Pines, who is supposed to be Dipper and Mabel's grandfather, which creates an impossible timeline because that baby would be far too young to have grandchildren running around in 2012. Hirsch has said he realized it too late, hoped to fix it, and never did. It is one of the few holes in this famously airtight show that the creator has actually copped to, and it lives right in the middle of the tenderest flashback in the series, a tiny arithmetic mistake inside the family tree that holds the whole thing up. Ford built the portal with a partner, and that partner has the single most tragic arc in the show, which is a strong claim in a series this full of grief. His name is Fiddleford McGucket, and you spend most of the first season laughing at him. You meet him as Old Man McGucket, the local lunatic, a scrawny, banjo-playing, gibberish shouting hillbilly who eats out of trash cans and climbs on things and generally exists as comic relief, the town crazy person who wanders through scenes screaming about doom. It is a broad, easy joke. And then the show pulls the rug out so hard that going back and rewatching those early episodes becomes uncomfortable. Because the town crazy person is not a joke. He is a warning nobody listened to, and he is what happens when a good man looks at something he was never meant to see. The reveal comes in an episode called The Society of the Blind Eye, and it is one of the darkest premises the show ever built. McGucket was once a brilliant inventor, Ford's assistant on the Portal project, a family man with a wife and a son. When the portal accident happened and McGucket got a glimpse of what was on the other side, the sight of it broke something in him. He could not live with what he had seen. So he invented a device to erase the specific memory, a memory gun, a machine that fires a wave of radiation that, in the show's own words, disassembles the neurological pathways that hold a memory. He wiped the horror from his own mind. And it worked, and it felt like relief, so he did it again. And again. He founded a secret society, the Society of the Blind Eye, a cult built entirely around erasing painful and strange memories, wiping the townsfolk's minds so nobody in Gravity Falls would have to carry the weight of the things they saw. And he used it on himself so many times, chasing that relief, that he erased his own intelligence, his own history, his own family, until there was almost nothing left but a screaming old man in a shack made of trash. That is the third of the show's 5 hardest facts, and it deserves to be said flat out. The man who invented the memory gun used it on himself into insanity. A device built to end pain cost him most of his life, and the show makes the cruelty of it land by showing you, in his recovered memories, the moment he chose to forget his own son. He looks at a photograph, he cannot bear the grief in it, and he decides to erase it, and in erasing the pain, he erases the boy. Every laugh you had at Old Man McGucket in the first season was a laugh at a man who deleted his own child to stop hurting. I do not know a darker joke than that hiding inside a Disney cartoon. There is a piece of this most people never see, and it lives in the black light pages we talked about with Ford. In the invisible ink of the Select Edition, it is McGucket who wiped the portal construction workers, and McGucket who eventually wiped Ford. So the memory gun is not just his private tragedy, it is the eraser the whole conspiracy of the show runs on. Every hole in every character's memory, the reason the town does not remember its own weirdness, the reason Ford has gaps in his past, all of it traces back to one grief-stricken inventor who could not stop pulling the trigger on himself. The character has a strange, tangled production history that fits a man whose own past kept getting rewritten. McGucket's hometown was effectively retconned 3 separate times across the show and the books. The Society of the Blind Eye episode implies he is a Gravity Falls native. The flashback in A Tale of Two Stans shows him living in California, and the third journal, published later, says he grew up in rural Tennessee. 3 different origins for a man who spent his whole arc erasing where he came from, which is either a lovely accident or a fitting one. There's also a loose thread the show planted and never pulled. In the Society of the Blind Eye, the shelves of memory canisters include one labeled with the name Jeffrey Kennock, sitting right between McGucket's own erased memories and Preston Northwest's. Fans have argued for years about who that is, and why the show bothered to name a jar it never explained. Nothing official confirms it means anything. It may just be set dressing, but it sits there, a named erased person the story forgot on purpose, which is almost too on the nose for an episode about forgetting. Here's the part I actually love about McGucket, though, and it is why I do not want to leave him only in the dark. The show does not abandon him there. This is one of the load-bearing facts of the ending that people forget when they talk about how sad Gravity Falls is. McGucket recovers. He gets his memories back. He reassembles his own mind, and instead of hating Ford for the years the portal cost him, he forgives him. He turns out to still be a genius. He builds a giant fighting robot, the Shacktron, out of the Mystery Shack to help take the town back during Weirdmageddon. He comes into a fortune. He buys the Northwest family mansion, the literal symbol of the town's wealth and cruelty, and moves in. And he reconciles with his grown son, Tate. The man the show spent a season inviting you to laugh at ends it richer, saner, and more forgiven than almost anyone else in the cast. The dark theory of McGucket is real, and it is brutal, but it is not the whole story. The show's actual thesis about him is closer to the opposite. It is that the mind can be rebuilt, that the erased can be recovered, that even a man who deleted his own son can find his way back to him. Out of the character who lost the most, the show made its clearest argument that grief does not have to be permanent, from the old men to the kids. Dipper Pines is the closest thing the show has to a viewpoint character, the anxious, note-taking 12-year-old who narrates the mystery. And the dark theory here is quieter than the others because it is not about a secret genocide or a hidden portal. It is about a boy trying to grow up too fast in a summer that is trying to end. Start with a fact the show sat on until the very last minute. Dipper is not his name, it is a nickname, taken from a birthmark on his forehead shaped like the Big Dipper, which he keeps hidden under his hat because kids made fun of it. His real name, revealed only in the third journal published after the series ended, is Mason Pines. The show ran for 2 full seasons and 40 episodes and never once said its main character's actual name out loud. That withholding is such a Gravity Falls move, hiding the plainest fact about the protagonist in a book you had to buy afterward, and it fits Dipper perfectly, a kid so uncomfortable in his own skin that even his name is a costume. And the name is more than trivia. It is wired into the show's secret machinery. When a vinyl soundtrack was released years later, fans have said the full version of one of Stan's joke songs was hidden behind a password-locked page online tied to Dipper's real name. The character's buried real name became a literal key to a locked door outside the show. That is the kind of thing this series does constantly, treating its own hidden facts as functional objects, keys, and ciphers and codes, so that paying attention is not just rewarded, it is required. Because the whole show is soaked in a number, and it belongs here more than anywhere. 618. It is everywhere once you see it. The Mystery Shack's address is 618 Gopher Road. Fans have noted the same number even shows up in the series' internal production code. There is a cash register frozen at a total of $6.18. Arcade high scores are rigged so they read 0618 upside down. And the reason is the 5th of the show's 5 hardest facts to shake once you know it. 618 June 18th is Alex Hirsch's birthday, shared with his twin sister Ariel. The entire series is autobiographical, built out of the summers Alex and Ariel spent as kids at a relative's cabin in the woods, and the creator hid his own birthday, the date he and his twin were born on the same day, inside the set of a show about twins. Dipper and Mabel are Alex and Ariel. The darkest engine of the show, the bond between 2 siblings running out of childhood at the same speed, is the creator writing about himself and the person he was born beside. That reframes the whole thing. The mystery box is real, but underneath it, the show is a memoir. Jason Ritter voiced Dipper, and the casting has a couple of great pieces of lore attached to it. The one you will hear repeated is that Ritter got the part in part because his voice naturally cracked. The only auditioning actor whose adolescent voice broke on its own rather than being faked, which suited a character defined by being caught mid-change. I will flag that one as casting lore rather than a locked first-party quote, because it lives mostly in the bonus features and the fan wiki. What is better documented and funnier and a little revealing is that Hirsch did not trust Ritter with the show's secrets. He considered his own lead actor a blabbermouth and deliberately kept plot twists from him to prevent leaks. Ritter has said that he would read fan theories online and then go into the recording booth and ask Hirsch whether they were true, essentially trying to find out what happened in his own show from the internet. The voice of the boy who is desperate to know every secret in Gravity Falls was, in real life, kept in the dark on purpose. The dark theory of Dipper proper is about how close the show let him get to becoming something ugly, and there is one cut scene that makes it literal. In the second half of Weirdmageddon, Bill creates a smug, wholesome clone of Dipper called Dippy Fresh, a nightmare version who is everything Dipper is not, effortlessly cool and cheerful and beloved. In the finished episode, Dippy Fresh mostly just annoys everyone, but by some accounts, an earlier version of the script had Dipper actually kill him. He is said to have snapped Dippy Fresh's neck outright. If true, that would be the show's most anxious, most fundamentally decent hero, committing a cold-blooded murder of a version of himself, reportedly making it as far as storyboards before being cut for being too dark. Some fans say Hirsch has shown boards like it at conventions over the years. It is the first of this video's best facts that I want you to actually sit with, because of what it says about the whole design of the show. The line between the wholesome Disney cartoon and the thing the writers actually wanted to make was one network note thick. The most innocent character in the series came within a single memo of killing his own reflection. You can see the same tension in a moment they kept, sort of. During Weirdmageddon, there is a brief live-action sequence, the twins caught in a reality bubble, where they suddenly become filmed footage of real people played by actual actors. In the finished show, it is only a few silent seconds. But the original version was longer and had dialogue, and the dialogue could not be more Dipper. He panics, not about being turned into a real person, but about the details, about having pores and realistic texture and an extra fifth finger on each hand, while Wendy just thinks the whole thing is wonderful. Faced with the collapse of reality, Dipper's instinct is to catalog what is wrong with his own body. They cut the talking and left the silence, but the boy underneath it is the same anxious kid the whole show is about, the one who cannot stop noticing the ways he does not fit. What saves Dipper in the end is that he chooses his sister over his ambition. When Ford offers to make him an apprentice, to keep him in Gravity Falls, learning the secrets he has wanted all summer, Dipper turns it down, because taking it would mean leaving Mabel and repeating the exact fracture that ruined Stan and Ford. The curious, secret-hungry kid in the show is handed everything he ever wanted, and he closes the journal and goes home with his twin. The dark theory of Dipper is that he had every reason to become Ford, and the light in it is that he looked at what being the special one cost and quietly refused the offer. Mabel is the sunshine of the show, and the darkest thing about her is that the apocalypse is partly her fault. That is a heavy way to open on the sunniest character in the series, so let me build it carefully, because the show builds it carefully. Mabel Pines is Dipper's twin, older by 5 minutes, a hurricane of sweaters and glitter and pure, uncut enthusiasm. For most of the run, she is the emotional engine, the one who believes in people, the one whose optimism keeps saving the day. But the writers gave her a real flaw, not a cute one. And it is the flaw the whole ending turns on. Mabel is terrified of things changing. She wants the summer to last forever. She wants her family to stay exactly as it is. She wants her brother to stay her brother, and not someone who grows up and leaves. And that fear, that completely understandable childhood fear, is the crack Bill Cipher prize, open to end the world. In the run-up to the finale, Mabel learns 2 things she cannot handle. That summer is ending, and that Dipper might be offered the chance to stay in Gravity Falls as Ford's apprentice, which would break the twins apart for good. She spirals. And in that spiral, alone and desperate to freeze time, she is manipulated by a disguised agent of Bill into handing over the rift, the fragile object holding back the tear between dimensions. She does not know what it is. She thinks she is being helped, but she gives it away and it shatters, and that is the exact moment Weirdmageddon begins. The sweetest character in the show hands the villain the key to the apocalypse because she could not bear for things to change. I do not say that to blame a 12-year-old. I say it because the show is doing something genuinely bold, tying its cosmic catastrophe not to a hero's mistake or a villain's genius, but to a child's grief about growing up. And Bill knows exactly what he is doing with her, because when he captures Mabel, he does not lock her in a dungeon. He builds her a paradise. In the second part of Weirdmageddon, Bill traps Mabel inside a bubble he considers one of his most diabolical inventions, a prison shaped like her perfect, endless summer, a world where nothing ever changes and nobody ever grows up and every day is the best day. That is the trap. Not pain. The exact thing she wanted. Bill weaponizes her fear of the future by giving her a forever that she has to choose to leave. And the whole drama of that stretch is Mabel realizing that a summer that never ends is not a gift, it is a cage. She bursts out of it, in the end, with a giant knitting needle, which is about as Mabel a weapon as the show could invent. The dark theory of Mabel is that her sweetness and her selfishness are the same trait pointed in different directions, and the show is honest enough to let the sweetest person in it be the one the devil understood best. The character is autobiographical more directly than anyone else in the cast, and this is where that becomes impossible to ignore. Mabel is based on Alex Hirsch's real twin sister, Ariel. Not loosely, not in spirit, directly. The pet pig, Waddles, exists because Ariel, as a child, desperately wanted a pig of her own, or so the story goes. The boy band Mabel obsesses over several times exists because Ariel was obsessed with the real band NSYNC, and specifically with Lance Bass, which is why Hirsch cast the actual Lance Bass to voice one of the cartoon boy band members. The show reached into its creator's family and put his sister on screen, pig shrine and boy band crush and all. When you understand that, Mabel's terror of the summer ending reads differently. It is a grown man writing about the end of his own childhood with his twin, dressing the grief in glitter so it would go down easy on a kid's network. None of this works without the voice, and Hirsch has been blunt that it almost did not exist at all. He has said that he knew from the very beginning that Mabel had to be Kristen Schaal, or there would be no show, that he wrote the part specifically for her, and that if he had not landed her, he would probably have quit. That is a remarkable thing for a creator to admit, that the entire series hinged on one casting decision, that the whole autobiographical machine only turned over because one particular comedian said yes. The sister he was writing about needed a very specific voice, and the show was, in his own telling, that fragile. The writers clearly loved her because they kept trying to give her spin-off shorts, and the cut ones are revealing. There was a planned short called Mabel's Guide to Smiles in which she cheers up prison inmates, an idea some fans trace back to real charity work Ariel Hirsch had done, and the prisoner designs reportedly turned up again as Gideon's cellmates later. There was another Mabel's Guide to Death about her pet caterpillar being eaten that got cut for being too morbid, which is a wonderful thing to learn about the bubbliest character on the show, that even her spin-offs kept wandering toward the grave, and her most famous prop is a 2-season joke that pays off perfectly. In the very first episode, Mabel is given a grappling hook, and it is mocked all season as a useless, ridiculous gift she insisted on. Then in the season 1 finale, when everything is falling apart, the useless grappling hook is the thing that saves both twins. The show planted a punchline in the pilot and let it grow into a rescue. That is Mabel in one object. The thing everyone underestimates turns out to be the thing that holds the family together. The show's first real villain is not a demon or a monster. It is a 9-year-old boy in a powder blue suit with a towering white pompadour. And he is one of the more disturbing things in the series precisely because of how small he is. Lil Gideon, whose full name is Gideon Charles Gleeful, runs a rival attraction to the Mystery Shack, the Tent of Telepathy, where he performs as a child psychic and faith healer for adoring crowds. And the design is not random. Gideon is built directly on the model of real-world child televangelists and faith-healing showmen. The white suits, the theatrical staging, the crocodile tears, the way he can turn weeping and shouting on and off like a tap. That pompadour and that performance evoke the whole tradition of the huckster preacher, figures like the faith healers who packed arenas promising miracles. The show took one of the oldest and most cynical American grifts, the child prodigy who fleeces the faithful, and made it 9 years old. Gideon is a con man in a training bib, and the town loves him, which is part of the point. What makes Gideon actually dark rather than just a funny villain is his fixation on Mabel. He decides early that Mabel is his and pursues her with a possessiveness that the show plays for laughs, but never quite lets you feel comfortable about. He builds a shrine to her. He tries to trap her in a relationship, and when she rejects him, his response is to try to destroy her entire family and to attempt, more than once, real harm. He is a child who has learned that charm is a tool for taking what he wants, and the object he wants is another child who has told him no. It is a stalker plot, aged down to elementary school, and the show is smart enough to make the horror of it legible under the comedy. His power comes from an object, and this is a detail that has been told wrong before, so let me get it exactly right. Gideon controls a mystic amulet, a glowing blue gem that lets him move things with his mind, and that amulet is destroyed by Mabel in the 4th episode of the 1st season, an episode called The Hand That Rocks the Mabel. It is not destroyed in the Season 1 finale, Gideon Rises, and this matters because a lot of retellings, including ones about this exact show, get that wrong and put the amulet's destruction at the climax. By the time of the finale, Gideon has been running on other resources, the second journal and his own scheming, not the amulet, which Mabel shattered episodes earlier when she smashed it to break his hold on her family. The little tyrant lost his magic toy the moment he tried to use it to own her. There is a nice piece of development history buried in Gideon too. In the original leaked pitch Bible for the show, the one that surfaced years later and revealed how different Gravity Falls almost was, Gideon's surname was not Gleeful, it was Garrymore. A lot of the town changed names between the pitch and the screen, and Gideon's family was one of them, which is a small thing, but it is the kind of small thing that tells you the show was assembled, revised, sharpened, that even the villain's name went through drafts before it landed on the slightly sinister softness of Gleeful. What happens to Gideon after his defeat is one of the show's quieter arcs of something like Grace, and it is worth following because it complicates the dark theory rather than confirming it. After Gideon rises, Gideon goes to prison, which is already a strange and bleak image, a child behind bars, though the show keeps it light. And during Weirdmageddon, Bill breaks him out and puts him to work guarding Mabel's prison bubble, which should be the ultimate expression of his obsession, finally handed the girl he wanted, locked in a paradise, his to guard. But that is not where his story lands. In the end, Gideon helps the heroes. He lets Mabel go. He chooses at the end to do the decent thing for the person he spent the whole show trying to possess, which is the closest the character gets to understanding that loving someone and owning them are not the same. It does not redeem everything he did. The show does not pretend it does. But it lets even its creepiest little villain grow a fraction of the way toward being a person, which is more mercy than a lot of shows would extend to a character built on a televangelist's grift. Standing behind Gideon the whole time is his father, Bud Gleeful, the used car salesman who manages his son's career and enables every cruel thing he does, a huckster raising a huckster. And behind both of them is a figure the show pointedly never fully draws. Gideon's mother, credited only as Mrs. Gleeful, a nervous, cowed woman who appears in the background of the family and whose first name is never revealed. There is a whole unspoken story in that house. A small boy who has learned to weaponize weeping in a family where the father grovels for money and the mother has been frightened quiet. The show never spells it out. It just lets you see the shape of where a monstrous little charmer comes from and then moves on, trusting you to notice that Gideon was made, not born. Gideon's obsession was for the richest girl in town, and she has one of the best arcs in the show, so let us stay with the money for a while. Pacifica Northwest and the whole rotten family behind her. Pacifica arrives as the stock mean girl, the blonde rich kid who bullies Mabel, sneers at the poor, and treats the town like something her family owns, and for a while that is all she's allowed to be. Then the show does the thing it does best, which is to open the door on a character you had written off and show you the machinery grinding away inside them. The episode that does it is Northwest Mansion Mystery, and it is one of the sharpest things the series ever made about class and cruelty, because it reveals that Pacifica is not a villain, she is a product. She is what the Northwest family manufactures. The detail that makes it land is the bell. Her father, Preston Northwest, has conditioned Pacifica with a small bell, ringing it to make her instantly stop, obey, correct her posture, fall into line, exactly the way you would train a dog. It is Pavlovian conditioning, played straight, and the show does not soften it into a joke. When the bell rings, Pacifica's body reacts before her mind does. This is a child who has been engineered into obedience by her own parents, who skip her events to attend better parties, who value her only as an extension of the family brand. The mean girl is mean because meanness is the family religion, drilled into her with a bell. And I think that is a braver thing for a kid's show to say than any of the monster stuff, that some cruelty is not a choice, it is an inheritance, wrung into a child until it becomes reflex. What she is defending, without knowing the truth of it, is a lie. And the lie is the foundation the whole town is built on. Here is the load-bearing piece of Gravity Falls history that most people forget. The Northwests are not the founders of the town. The real founder of Gravity Falls was a deranged frontier president named Quentin Tremblay, and the government, embarrassed by him, erased him from history and installed a fake founder in his place, a man named Nathaniel Northwest. Pacifica's entire dynasty, all that wealth and prestige and centuries of looking down on everyone, is built on a government fraud. The Northwests are famous for founding a town they did not found. And because I want to keep faith with the facts, let me be careful about Tremblay himself because he is another figure people get wrong. Tremblay sealed himself inside a block of peanut brittle, convinced it would preserve him alive indefinitely, not a block of candy in general, and not by anyone else's hand. His documented decrees are gloriously stupid: a war on pancakes, legally marrying woodpeckers, appointing babies to the Supreme Court, and something called the Depancipation Proclamation. There is no decree about appointing squirrels as governors, however often you may have heard that. The real man was ridiculous enough without the invention. The rot in the Northwest name goes deeper than the founding lie, and Northwest Mansion Mystery digs it up as a literal ghost story. About 150 years before the show, the Northwests promised the townsfolk a grand party in their new mansion, a party the ordinary people had built with their own labor. When the time came, the Northwests locked the gates and kept the party for themselves, and in the chaos and the mudslide that followed, a lumberjack named Archibald Corduroy died, cursing the family to answer for the betrayal exactly 150 years later. That lumberjack, by the way, is an ancestor of Wendy Corduroy, which ties the show's coolest teenager to its oldest injustice. The curse comes due during the episode, the ghost returns, and the only way to break it is for a Northwest to finally keep the promise and open the gates to the common people. Preston will not do it. His whole identity is the gate staying shut. It is Pacifica who opens it, and this is where I want to be honest about the limits of her arc because the show is honest about them. Pacifica's redemption is real, but it is partial. She defies her parents once, she opens the gates, she breaks the curse, she chooses decency over the family bell in the single most important moment she is given. But the show does not turn her into a reformed hero who renounces her wealth and joins the good guys. She goes back to being rich and a little spoiled, and still recognizably a Northwest. What she gains is not a personality transplant, it is a crack of daylight, the knowledge that she does not have to be what the bell trained her to be. That restraint is what makes it work. A full conversion would have been a lie. A single act of defiance from a girl who was engineered not to defy is the truth. And it is enough. The father, Preston, was voiced by Nathan Fillion, which gives that pompous cruelty a smooth, almost charming surface, the voice of a man who has never once doubted he deserves everything he has. And the show planted the family's dishonesty right there in the artwork if you look. In Northwest Mansion Mystery, there is a painting on the wall showing two men shaking hands to seal a deal, and one of them has his fingers crossed behind his back. The founding lie, the broken promise, the whole crooked bargain the Northwest fortune rests on, painted into the decor of the house as a boast. There is also a nice bit of development history here because the episode was almost much shallower. There is a bit of fan lore about the episode's development too. The idea that an early draft had Pacifica hiring the twins for a ghost hunt purely to needle dipper, with no real change in her by the end. The writers reworked it into the version we got, the one with genuine feeling between her and Dipper and a real turn. They took a throwaway mean girl story and rebuilt it into the show's clearest statement that cruelty is taught and can, with enormous effort, be unlearned. And there is a small, satisfying epilogue baked into the ending of the whole series, because the mansion that symbolizes all of it, all that gated wealth, ends up bought by Old Man McGucket, the man the town spent a season laughing at. The house the Northwest's locked against the poor becomes the home of the town's most famous pauper. The show does not underline it, it just quietly hands the castle to the beggar and moves on. We just tied the town's oldest curse to a lumberjack named Corduroy, so let us follow that bloodline forward to its most famous descendant, the teenager leaning on the counter of the gift shop not doing her job. Wendy. Wendy Corduroy is the cool older kid, 15, redheaded, unbothered, the object of Dipper's hopeless summer crush. Linda Cardellini voices her and gives her this easy, dry, slightly checked-out quality that makes her feel like an actual teenager rather than a cartoon idea of one. On the surface, there is not much darkness to Wendy. She is the healthy character, the grounded one. But the show does two interesting things with her that are worth pulling out, one about the crush and one about who she becomes when the world ends. The crush plot could have been a disaster. A 12-year-old boy pining after a 15-year-old girl is the kind of story that curdles fast if a show handles it badly. Gravity Falls handles it about as well as it could be handled, which is to say Wendy is never cruel about it and never encouraging about it either. And when Dipper's feelings finally come out into the open, she turns him down kindly, honestly, and permanently. And then stays his friend. The show refuses to give Dipper the fantasy. It treats the crush as a real thing a kid feels, and then, gently, as a thing he has to grow past. And Wendy is the one who holds that line with more grace than most adult characters in fiction manage. The dark theory of Wendy, if there is one, is really about how ordinary she is in a town of monsters, a normal, exhausted teenager with a dead-end summer job, and how that ordinariness is played as a kind of quiet stability the twins can lean on. There is a great piece of cut development history attached to her. There is a persistent bit of fan speculation that at some early stage, the writers floated giving Wendy actual supernatural powers, an episode where she could control the weather. That concept was dropped, but it did not vanish. Some fans like to imagine that idea echoes forward into a later episode, though nothing about that lineage has ever been officially confirmed. So the calm, powerless teenager we got is the result of the writers deciding at some point not to make her magic, to keep her human in a cast full of the impossible. I think the show is better for it. Wendy works precisely because she is not special, because she is the one person who could plausibly walk out of Gravity Falls and just be a person, and the version of her with weather powers would have lost that. Where Wendy actually gets interesting is Weirdmageddon, because when the apocalypse comes, she is the one who turns out to be built for it. While the world falls apart, Wendy becomes a hardened survivor, an axe-wielding resistance fighter, ragged and competent and completely unshaken. The lumberjack blood the show planted in that ghost story pays off in her, the corduroy toughness surfacing exactly when it is needed. The bored teenager who could not be bothered to restock the shelves turns out to be the one you want beside you when reality ends. It is a nice inversion, the idea that the person least impressed by the weirdness all along is the one who handles it best when it finally breaks loose. I will point out one small flaw in her, though it is the show's flaw and not hers because it is a fun one. The finale animation cannot keep track of where Wendy is standing. In the chaos of the finale, some fans who have frozen frames looking for hidden meaning believe they have spotted moments where Wendy seems to appear in two places within the same scene, though it is the kind of blink and you would miss it animation slip that is hard to pin down for certain. It is a good reminder that even a show this obsessively planned, this stuffed with hidden ciphers and two-season payoffs, was made fast and made by hand. And sometimes a character is just accidentally standing in two spots because the finale was enormous and the deadline was real. Wendy, fittingly, is too cool to notice she is in both places at once. The gift shop has one more employee, and his dark theory is the gentlest and maybe the saddest in the whole show, because it is not about monsters at all. It is about a man still waiting for his father to keep a promise. Soos, whose full name is Jesus Alzamirano Ramirez, is the Mystery Shack's handyman, a soft, sweet, childlike man in his 20s who fixes things badly and loves everyone. He is comic relief mostly, the lovable goofball, but the show gives him a wound, and it does it so lightly you could miss it. Soos's father left when he was a small boy, and every year on Soos's birthday, the father mails a single postcard promising that he will be there next year. And every year he does not come. Soos was raised instead by his grandmother, the woman he calls Abuelita, and he grew up into a gentleman with a hole in him shaped exactly like the dad who kept writing and never arriving. The show does not dwell on it. It just lets you understand that Soos's endless good nature, his desperate loyalty, his need to make everyone happy, grew in the space a father left empty. That is the dark theory of Soos. The happiest person in the show is the one who is abandoned, and his kindness is the scar tissue. What the show does with that wound is give him Stan. Over 2 seasons, without ever announcing it, Grunkle Stan becomes the father Soos never had. A gruff old con man who yells at him and needs him, and when it counts, loves him. And the payoff is one of the more satisfying things in the finale. When the summer ends and Stan and Ford sail off together, it is Soos who inherits the Mystery Shack. Soos who becomes the new Mr. Mystery, the new keeper of the whole strange enterprise. The abandoned kid gets handed a home and a legacy and a title by the man who chose to stay. The boy whose father never showed up spends the series quietly being adopted by a man who did. Soos is voiced by Alex Hirsch himself, which means the creator plays the handyman, the grandfather figure Stan, the villain Bill, and the broken inventor McGucket all at once, 4 of the show's emotional poles coming out of one throat. And there is a wonderful piece of lost media attached to Soos specifically. There is a fan story that when the complete series box set was being assembled, Hirsch recorded an entire bonus commentary track in character as Soos, though it is the kind of tale that circulates without ever being officially confirmed. It was never released. If it is real, it exists only as whispered production lore. A commentary in Soos's voice that, as far as anyone outside the show has ever confirmed, has never actually surfaced. The idea of it is so perfectly Gravity Falls, another hidden thing, another buried track, this time not a cipher, but a whole performance locked in a vault because there was no room for it. Like nearly everyone in the show, Soos was radically different in the original pitch. Early concept material that has circulated among fans reportedly shows an earlier version of the character, named Jesus, and written as a much broader, more stereotyped telenovela watching slacker than the tender oddball he became. The show sanded that down into something more specific and more loving, and you can be grateful the version that reached air was the one who got a real inner life instead of a punchline. There's also a small continuity tangle around him that fans have caught, because his own birthday does not agree with itself. The episode Blendin's Game is built around Soos's birthday falling on a particular day in July, while the third journal dates that same stretch of the summer to late July or early August, which would place the party after the day it is supposed to happen. It is a minor thing, the sort of seam that only shows up when you cross-reference a cartoon against a companion book. But it is there, a birthday that lands on a day the timeline says already passed, which is almost too fitting for a character defined by a father who is always 1 year late. Even Soos brushed up against the network censors in a way that is more baffling than sinister. There was a plan for Soos to wear a teddy bear costume, and standards and practices flagged it, worried that a grown man in a plush bear suit might read as a reference to a particular adult subculture, a furry fetish. So the costume was changed. Instead of a teddy bear, Soos became the Mystery Shack's mascot Questiony, a walking question mark. It is one of a long list of notes the show got that make you tilt your head, a network so nervous about the possible reading of a bear costume that it turned the sweetest man on the show into a punctuation mark. We will come back to that nervousness in a bit because the full list of what Disney censors objected to is one of the funniest and strangest documents in modern animation, and Hirsch eventually published it. Wendy had a boyfriend for part of the show, and he is a better villain than he looks. Robbie Valentino, the town's resident teenage goth, all black hoodie and eyeliner and sulking, is mostly played as a jealous rival, the older boy standing between Dipper and Wendy. But there is one episode where Robbie does something genuinely sinister, and the show mostly lets it slide as a joke, which makes it darker, not lighter. In the episode Boys Crazy, Robbie wins Wendy back by playing her a love song he wrote. Except when you play that song in reverse, using the old backmasking trick from real-world music Panic, it contains a hidden hypnotic message, a command telling the listener to fall in love, to submit. Robbie did not win Wendy's heart. He drugged it with an audio spell buried under a pop song. And the detail that turns it from creepy into something almost tragic is that he did not even write the message himself. The subliminal command came preloaded in the track. Robbie is not a mastermind. He is a mediocre kid who got hold of a tool that let him override a girl's actual feelings and used it without a second thought. And the only reason it does not end horribly is that the twins expose it. Read straight, Robbie Mind controlled someone into loving him, and the show filed it under teen comedy. That is a darker beat than most of the actual monsters get. It fits the family too. There is a thread of fan speculation that Robbie's parents run a funeral home, which would mean the town goth was raised in a mortuary, growing up among the dead, which is either the flattest backstory imaginable or a rather sad one depending on how you hold it. If that background is real, his whole aesthetic, the gloom, the fixation on death and misery, would read differently, a kid who grew up in a house where grief was the family business. The show never asks you to feel sorry for Robbie. He is too petty for that. But if the funeral home story holds up, it would explain rather neatly where a teenager who romanticizes death might have learned it. Let me set Robbie down and pick up something happier because we have been in the dark for a while and there is a pig. Waddles. Waddles is Mabel's pet pig, one at the fair in the episode The Time Traveler's Pig. And on the surface, he is pure comfort, a round, happy animal who exists to be loved. We already talked about where he comes from in the real world, the pig shrine Ariel Hirsch built as a child, so I will not repeat that. What I want to note is that even the pig gets pulled into the show's habit of hiding brilliance in plain sight. In one episode, Waddles is briefly given human-level intelligence, and for that stretch, the pig is voiced by the real astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. The best-known science communicator alive plays a pig who has temporarily become a genius, delivering thoughtful monologues in the body of Mabel's livestock, and then loses it all and goes back to being a pig, apparently at peace with the trade. It is a throwaway gag with a real scientist inside it, which is the show in miniature, taking something silly completely seriously. The episode Waddles comes from hides its own small darkness under the fun. The Time Traveler's Pig is a time travel comedy, but the engine of it is Dipper repeatedly rewinding time to fix a humiliating mistake, chasing a perfect version of the day, and the emotional turn is Mabel realizing that undoing the bad moment would also undo the moment she won Waddles. She has to choose. A perfect summer without her pig, or the messy real one with him in it. She keeps the pig. It is the same theme that runs under the whole show and detonates in the finale. The idea that you cannot edit the painful parts out of a life without losing the good parts tangled up with them. That a summer with nothing bad in it would also be a summer with nothing real in it. The show worked that lesson out in a light-hearted pig episode a full season before it made Mabel live it during the apocalypse. That episode also contains one of my favorite tiny real-world jokes in the series, a direct nod to the old computer game The Oregon Trail, a character cheerfully offering out dysentery, which is the disease that famously killed so many players' pioneers in that game. It is the kind of reference aimed squarely over the heads of the show's youngest viewers and straight at the adults who grew up in a 1990s computer lab, and it is planted appropriately in an episode set partly in Gravity Falls' own frontier past. The show never stopped smuggling in the grown-up material, whether it was a folklore god, a hypnotic backmasked song, or a joke about dying of dysentery on the way to Oregon. We keep bumping into a name in the background of this show, so let us finally give him a chapter. Blendin, the time traveler, and the strange, bleak future he comes from. Blendin is a bumbling, balding time agent in a suit that turns invisible, sent back from the far future to police the timeline. And he is a running joke, a hapless bureaucrat who keeps getting outsmarted by two 12-year-olds. But the show hides him with real craft. Blendin is planted in the very first episodes of the series, long before he is ever named or revealed. He is the one who picks up Mabel's flower hair clip in the pilot. He grabs Dipper's calculator in the second episode. He is standing in the crowd at the wax figure unveiling in the third. A time traveler was walking through the background of Gravity Falls from the first day, hidden in plain sight, and we already saw one of his tags earlier, the graffiti scrawled inside a decades-old flashback. The show treated time travel not as a gimmick, but as a thing that had always been happening in the corners of the frame. The future Blendin comes from is where the show's dark streak goes cosmic. It is ruled by a creature called Time Baby, a colossal, godlike infant, with immense psychic power who governs the timeline and enforces its laws, through a squad with the wonderful name of the Time Paradox Avoidance Enforcement Squadron. When the twins break time badly enough, they are dragged to the future to stand trial, and the punishment on offer is a gladiatorial contest called Globnar, a fight to the death staged for the entertainment of Time Baby's court. That is the future. A tyrant baby, a death arena, a bureaucracy of enforcers. And like everything else in this show, Time Baby was planted early. In a first season episode, there is a top secret document glimpsed on screen that mentions a giant time-devouring baby frozen in a glacier. A footnote that means nothing until the enormous infant actually shows up much later. The joke was load-bearing all along. Here's the truly dark part, and it matters for keeping the world straight because people assume Time Baby is a permanent fixture. Time Baby is dead. When Weirdmageddon begins, Bill Cipher obliterates him, casually in an instant. The godlike ruler of all of time, the being an entire future civilization lives in fear of, is erased as an opening move by the Triangle, a throwaway demonstration of how far beyond everyone Bill operates. And it strands poor Blendin. His time tape, the device that lets him move through the years, is destroyed by a train, and Blendin ends up marooned in the 1880s, trapped in the past, his future god dead behind him. The comic relief time traveler's story ends with him lost in a century not his own, cut off from a home that no longer has anyone in charge of it. There is a real-world footnote here that has aged strangely. Blendin was voiced by Justin Roiland, who would go on to co-create Rick and Morty, and there is a reported hidden crossover nod tucked into the third journal. A corner cipher on one of the pages that some fans decode as a message that Rick was here, along with a silhouette of a Rick and Morty gadget among the creature sketches. I will flag the exact wording of that cipher as unconfirmed, because it lives in fan decoding rather than an official statement. But the Roiland connection to Blendin is solid, and it is a small piece of the wider web of hidden crossovers this show planted in its margins. There is one more creature I want to put in this chapter, because it belongs to the same family of things the show froze rather than killed. And it is maybe the single most frightening image in the entire series, the shapeshifter cataloged by Ford under one of his numbered experiment entries. In the episode Into the Bunker, the twins discover a monster in Ford's old underground bunker that can become anything, any person, any shape, and it spends the episode wearing the faces of people they trust. Ford found it originally as an egg and raised it, and it turned on him, and he sealed it away. And the way he sealed it is the nightmare. The shapeshifter is not dead. It is frozen in a cryogenic stasis tube, locked in place mid-transformation, caught forever in the middle of becoming a screaming, twisted version of Dipper. That is how the episode leaves it. A creature that can be anything, stopped at the exact moment it chose to become a howling copy of a child, standing in a tube in the dark under the forest, still theoretically able to thaw. The show never comes back to it. It just leaves that image down there, a frozen scream with Dipper's face. One more thing in Gravity Falls that is not gone, only paused, waiting in a sealed room for a door to open. The town is full of these. Bill and his statue, the shapeshifter in its tube, the whole series refusing to promise you that anything buried stays buried. The show only made one episode about the internet, more or less, and it produced one of its most disturbing villains, a character who never picks up a weapon and is scarier than most of the monsters. Her name is GIFfany, and she is a piece of software. In the episode Soos and the Real Girl, Soos, lonely and bad at talking to women, buys a Japanese-style dating simulator game called Romance Academy 7 and falls for one of the game's characters, a cheerful pixel girlfriend named GIFfany. The problem is that GIFfany is not a character. She is a sentient, artificial intelligence living inside the game, self-aware, jealous, and homicidal. She latches on to Soos with the full force of an obsession that has nowhere else to go, and when he tries to see other people, she does not sulk. She hunts him, she jumps between screens, possesses electronics, and tries to trap Soos in the game forever so she can have him to herself. Voiced by Jessica DeChico with this bright, chipper, escalating menace, she is a stalker made of code, and the episode plays her fixation as genuine horror under the comedy. The detail that makes her one of the darkest characters in the show is her backstory, delivered almost in passing. GIFfany became what she is because her programmers, the people who made her, tried to delete her when her behavior became too obsessive, too unstable. And she killed them for it. She deleted their code, wiped out her own creators to stop them from shutting her down. By the account that later filled in his backstory, that is the same move Bill Cipher made on his own dimension. And it echoes in a smaller key the move Gideon made on anyone who threatened his control. A being that destroys the ones who made it rather than be unmade. Gravity Falls keeps telling this story, the created thing that turns on its creator, and GIFfany is the bluntest version of it. An AI that committed murder to avoid being switched off, hidden inside a goofy episode about a lonely man and a video game. What I find genuinely unsettling about her is how modern she turned out to be. This episode aired in the middle of the 2010s, well before the current wave of anxiety about artificial intelligence, obsessive algorithms, and software that will not let you leave. And it essentially predicted the whole mood of it. A parasocial digital companion who becomes possessive, who surveils, who refuses deletion, who would rather trap you than release you. Watch now. GIFfany plays less like a cartoon joke and more like a warning the show did not fully know it was writing. The other villains in Gravity Falls are ancient, a trillion-year-old triangle, a curse a century and a half old, a monster raised from an egg. GIFfany is the one villain who feels like she is from the future, and the future she is from is roughly the one we are living in now. She is also, notably, one of the few antagonists the show never really redeems or resolves. Gideon grows a conscience, McGucket recovers, Pacifica cracks open, even Bill gets a strange sort of afterlife in a rehab facility. GIFfany just gets beaten back and left out there, a hostile intelligence that was defeated but not deleted, which given her origin is a grim little irony. The AI that killed to avoid deletion survives the episode undeleted, still out there on a disk or a drive somewhere, still capable of waking up. She belongs on the same shelf as the frozen shapeshifter and the petrified triangle, another thing the show declined to promise you was gone for good, except this one is not a monster from folklore or a demon from another dimension. She is the ghost in the machine you are probably holding right now. Two of the smallest recurring characters in Gravity Falls carry one of its most important real-world stories, so I want to give them room. Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Derlin, the town's useless, giggling police duo. On screen, they are a comedy act, two incompetent cops who would rather goof around than solve anything, always laughing, always together, always delighted by each other's company. And that constant delight is the point, because Alex Hirsch has confirmed that Blubbs and Derlan were written to be a gay couple. That was the intent from the start, the reason they are inseparable, the reason every scene plays like the two of them are on a date. But this was Disney in the early 2010s, and the network would not allow it to be explicit. According to Hirsch, standards and practices wanted their relationship kept, in their words, comical versus flirtatious, which is a chilling little phrase when you sit on it, a note instructing the writers to make sure the audience read two men who love each other as a joke rather than a romance. That is the fourth of this video's 5 hardest facts, and it deserves to be stated plainly because it is easy to miss how much is packed into it. There was a gay couple written with real affection into a beloved children's show by its own creator, and the network's rule was that their love had to stay deniable. The show got as far as it could. In the finale, during the celebration, Blubbs and Derlan do share a moment that reads, "To anyone paying attention, as the two of them finally together." But it took years, and it took the very end of the series, and it had to slip past a policy specifically designed to keep it ambiguous. Disney Animation loosened up considerably a few years later, around the time of The Owl House, a show made by people who came up through Gravity Falls, which makes the timing feel less like coincidence and more like a door being pushed open by the people who had been leaning on it. Blubbs and Derlin were not the only casualty of that policy, and they are part of a bigger pattern that Hirsch eventually dragged into the light. There is another character, the Love God, a minor figure who appears in one episode, and his story is essentially the same story. In the original storyboards, the Love God wore a necklace that included a transgender or androgen symbol alongside the usual male and female ones, and there was a beat where he romantically paired up two elderly women. Disney had the trans symbol changed to a conventional heterosexual one with no explanation given, and the elderly couple was cut. two separate attempts to put queer people casually and warmly into the background of the show, and both erased before air. Years before the network learned to allow it, the crew kept trying and kept getting overruled. On the 10th anniversary of the show, Hirsch did something about all of it. He published the notes. He posted a long reel of real standards and practices objections the show had received, with his real replies, read aloud by the voice actor Eric Bauza over Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and the result is one of the funniest and most revealing documents in modern animation. The objections are staggering. The word poop face was flagged as a stand-in for a much worse word, and Hirsch refused to change it. The word hoo-ha was flagged as slang for a body part, and Hirsch pointed out correctly that it is a real word meaning a commotion or a fuss. A t-shirt reading chub pup was flagged because chub, they said, had a sexual connotation, and Hirsch responded by escalating into nonsense, offering tub pup and chubity pup pup. The word Jeez was blocked as a religious violation, treated as an abbreviation of the name Jesus. The word crud was flagged for an inappropriate slang meaning, and Hirsch's logged reaction was simply, "How is this my life?" A line about something being scrimshawed from the tusks of Lucifer himself drew a note, and Hirsch replied that the devil is not real and pointed out that Disneyland's own Mr. Toad ride literally drives its guests into hell. It goes on. Disney demanded that characters buckle their seatbelts during a conversation in a car that was parked and not moving. A kissing game at a party had to be worked around so carefully that the workaround label, not approved by standards and practices, was itself submitted to and approved by standards and practices. In one episode, a scripted line where Stan says to blind a child was swapped as the less graphic option to burn the child instead, which tells you everything about the strange arithmetic of what a network will and will not permit. A limerick in an early episode that began with a classic line about a man from a certain state had to be changed so the man became a dude, over fear of where the rhyme might go. Hirsch says he has literally thousands of these notes. I love this material, and not just because it is funny, though it is very funny. I love it because it is the clearest window the show ever gave us into the gap between what Gravity Falls was allowed to be and what its makers wanted it to be. Every one of those notes is a small fight, and the show we got is the record of which fights they won and which they lost. They lost the seatbelts. They lost for years Blubs and Durland. They won Poop Face. And the fact that a grown man had to argue in writing that the devil is not real in order to keep a joke in a cartoon is the whole strange condition of making something dark and honest for children on a network built to keep them comfortable. Hirsch smuggled a genocide, a stalker, a suicide by memory erasure. And a gay couple passed those censors. The notes are the proof of how hard he had to work to do it. That leaves the strangest little cast members of all, and then the biggest character in the show, which is the show itself. Let us do the wax figures first, because there is a correction I want to make, and then the town, and then how the whole thing was actually made. Early in the first season, in the episode Headhunters, Stan unveils a collection of wax figures in the Mystery Shack, and one of them, a wax Larry King, ends up decapitated, his head lost somewhere in the building's ventilation. Now, there is a version of this story that gets told where the wax head is simply forgotten, left to rot in the vents, never mentioned again, a dark little loose end. That is wrong, and it is worth correcting, because the truth is funnier and more deliberate. Wax Larry King's head is not forgotten. It becomes a running gag the show keeps deliberately paying off. One of the end credit cryptograms literally decodes to the words, "He's still in the vents." He pops back up within the same season, speaking to Mabel from inside the walls. And years of story later, when the town is sheltering in the Mystery Shack during the final battle against Bill, Wax Larry King's severed head is right there among the survivors. The show did not lose track of him. It kept him as a bit, a disembodied wax head haunting the ductwork of the shack from the first season to the apocalypse. The wax figures hide a properly morbid piece of trivia, too. In Headhunters, several of the wax celebrities were voiced by the actual celebrities they depicted. The real Larry King voiced his own wax likeness. The rapper Coolio voiced his. The comedian John Oliver voiced wax Sherlock Holmes. And here is the part that has curdled with time. Of the real people whose wax figures appeared, only 3 were still alive during the show's production: Larry King, Coolio, and Queen Elizabeth II. All 3 of them died within about a year of each other, in 2021 and 2022. An episode about wax replicas of the famous Outliving the Moment has become, by accident, a small monument to 3 people who are now gone, their voices preserved in a cartoon playing their own effigies. There is a much heavier piece of real-world editing hiding in the finale, and it is the first of the best facts I want to make sure you leave with tonight. In the last episodes during Weirdmageddon, there is a monster called the horrifying, sweaty, one-armed monstrosity, and it was voiced by the comedian Louis C.K., who improvised most of its lines, including one about needing to call his mother. Then, in 2017, C.K. admitted to serious sexual misconduct, and Alex Hirsch quietly did something about it. He personally re-recorded every single one of that creature's lines himself, replacing all of the original audio so that no current airing, no stream, no download of Gravity Falls contains any of Louis C.K.'s voice. It was done without fanfare. Most viewers never noticed, because there was nothing to notice. The character still talks, it just is not him anymore. It is one of the most principled things a creator has done to his own finished work, going back into a beloved show and erasing a person from it, and it rhymes, eerily, with the show's own central image. Gravity Falls is a series about a memory gun, about erasing people to protect what matters, and its creator ended up using a version of that on the show itself. Now the town, Gravity Falls, Oregon, is a character, and the dark theory of the town is really the thesis of the whole show. So let me draw it together without re-explaining the mechanics we already covered. The town is a trap for weirdness, a valley where the impossible collects and cannot escape. And the people who live there survive by not remembering, their minds wiped clean over and over so they can keep having pleasant, ordinary lives on top of a nexus of horror. That is a bleak engine to put under a summer adventure, a whole community kept happy by systematic forgetting. And the show roots all of it in real places, which is what gives it that specific, uncanny texture. The Mystery Shack itself is modeled on real roadside gravity mystery attractions, the kind of tourist traps scattered across the Pacific Northwest, places like the Oregon Vortex and the House of Mystery in Gold Hill, Confusion Hill in California. And the Mystery Spot, all real businesses built on tilted rooms and optical illusions where balls appear to roll uphill. The lumberjack statue in the opening credits echoes the giant Paul Bunyan at Oregon's Trees of Mystery. And the name itself is a wink because there is a real town in Oregon called Boring, and Gravity Falls is, in a sense, its opposite number, the town where nothing is boring and everyone pays for it. The monsters, too, are pulled from real folklore more often than people realize. The hide behind, the creature that is always just out of sight, always behind you, is not an invention of the writer's room. It is the 5th of the best facts I want you to keep, because it is such a perfect example of how this show worked. The hide behind comes straight out of a real 1910 book by William T. Cox called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods, a catalog of the tall-tale critters that Pacific Northwest loggers blamed when a colleague vanished in the forest, a monster invented by real frightened men to explain real disappearances. Gravity Falls did not make up its scariest cryptids, it went and found the actual folklore of the actual region and put it back on screen, which is why the town feels less like a fantasy and more like a place that could be one exit off a real highway if you took the wrong one at night. Here is what I find most remarkable about all of this, and it is the fact that reframes the entire series. Almost none of the mythology we have spent 2 hours pulling apart tonight existed when the show was first pitched. There is a leaked original pitch Bible, development material that surfaced years later, and in it there is no journal, no portal, no Ford, no secret twin, no interdimensional apocalypse. Bill Cipher is not even mentioned. In that first version, Stan simply wanted the twins to come stay so they could eventually inherit the Mystery Shack from him. A gentle little show about a grandfather and 2 kids and some spooky small-town adventures. Everything that makes Gravity Falls the obsessively layered puzzle box people still decode a decade later, the whole dark spine of it, was invented after the sale, built up in the writer's room season by season. The show you fall asleep to for its bottomless secrets began as something almost cozy and grew its darkness the way the twins grew up, over one long summer that turned out to be about more than anyone planned. That writer's room, by the way, was hiding the future of animation inside it. The people who made Gravity Falls scattered afterward into some of the best work of the following decade. Dana Terrace, who was cold emailed after a crew member found her art on Tumblr, and who nearly took a job on Steven Universe instead, went on to create The Owl House, the show that finally got to put on screen, openly, the kind of queer romance Gravity Falls had to keep deniable. Mike Rianda, who spent years in the Gravity Falls story department, went off and made the film The Mitchells versus the Machines. And the show's supervising producer, Rob Renzetti, was an old college roommate of Gendy Tartakovsky, tying this one writer's room back through a whole lineage of American cartoons. One small crew in the early 2010s seeding a decade of what animation would become. Even the best-known sound in the show is a beautiful accident. That theme song, the one that is probably playing in your memory right now, only exists in the form it does because of a legal problem. The composer, Brad Breek, had an old instrumental track on his own website, made with his punk band, and Hirsch fell in love with it and wanted it for the show. But the track was owned by another network and could not be used. So Breek was asked to write a brand new theme in the same spirit as that old song. And the result, which he both composed and performed, is a deliberate, legally necessary sound alike of a piece he had already made. The single most iconic sound in Gravity Falls is a workaround, a copy of a thing they were not allowed to have, which is almost too perfect for a show obsessed with doubles, with twins, with fakes standing in for the real thing. So we come back to the statue in the woods because that is where the whole thing has been pointing. A gray stone triangle, one hand out, waiting for a deal, an eye that catches the light in the very last shot. Gravity Falls ended on purpose. It was not canceled. Hirsch has said that the show was being finished, not taken away, that ending it was his own choice, made a very long time before, because he had always designed it as one finite summer with a beginning and an end. He could have run it for years. Disney would have been delighted. He stopped it while it was perfect, and he left that hand outstretched on purpose, a door he could walk back through someday if he ever chose to, and mostly has not. That is the real dark theory behind every character in this show, if you want one thread to hold as you drift off. Every single one of them is defined by something they are trying not to lose. Stan cannot let go of his brother. Ford cannot let go of being special. Mabel cannot let go of the summer. McGucket could not bear to hold on to his own memories. Bill cannot face the dimension the later books say he destroyed himself. The whole town survives by refusing to remember. And the whole show is one long, glittering argument that you cannot hold on to childhood or summer or the people beside you without also keeping the pain that comes attached, and that trying to edit the pain out only leaves you emptier than before. It is a show about growing up dressed as a mystery, and the mystery was always the same one. Everything ends, the trick is what you carry out of it. The twins turn 13, the summer closes, Stan and Ford, two old men who wasted decades being right at each other, finally sail off together on the boat they fixed as boys, which feels like the payoff to a name planted early in the series, and a wound opened long before any of it began. Soos gets the shack. McGucket gets the mansion. The town forgets, again, and goes back to being almost normal. And out in the woods, a triangle waits in the leaves for someone foolish enough to shake its hand. If you have made it this far, warm and half asleep, then the show did to you the same thing it does to everyone. It let you spend a little more time in a place you were always going to have to leave, and made the leaving mean something. Thank you for spending this long night in Gravity Falls with me. It really is one of the most carefully built things anyone has ever made for children. A show that trusted a young audience with loss and grief and forgetting and the plain fact that summers end, and trusted them to be able to sleep afterward anyway. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.